What do you think do opioids, climate change, and a toxic work culture have in common? Not a lot, actually, besides the fact that the big consulting firms are using all of them to profit at the expense of society. This is how. For this video, I dove deep into the dark side of consulting. I read books, newspaper articles, and court documents. In short, I got absolutely obsessed with researching McKinsey's shady involvement in the opioid crisis. And I obviously also dove into other consulting scams as well. It all boils down to a few things: undisclosed conflicts of interest, playing both sides, and corporate greed. Oh, and also PowerPoint slides. Lots and lots of PowerPoint slides. The kind of McKinsey slides that include screenshots of Donald Trump in The Apprentice to visualize how sales representatives should be incentivized to sell even more opioids. So, stay tuned for the incredible stuff I found while snooping through the UCSF Document repository, a digital archive full of documents that were publicized in light of the opioid litigation in 2021. And I find that these emails and these bizarre, yet very, very real PowerPoints have had way too little of the public attention. So, welcome to the third episode of my consulting series, a series where I, an ex-consultant, explain how consulting works and tell you all about the consulting industry's scams. Now, without further ado, let's dive into McKinsey's role in the opioid crisis. Something they'd rather we didn't talk about, because even though the firm paid over $600 million to settle further government investigations, the consulting firm will not admit to any wrongdoing. But you can be the judge of that after I tell you how the opioid crisis that cost the lives of 750,000 people went down and what McKinsey's role was in that. But firstly, what are opioids? According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, opioids are a class of drugs naturally found in the opium poppy plant, but it can also be made synthetically. They have a history of being used as medicine, as they have pain-relieving properties. But they also can make people feel very relaxed and high, so some people use them recreationally, which is dangerous as opioids are really addictive. Like, for example, heroin, which is an opioid. Other examples of opioids are codeine, fentanyl, morphine, oxycodone, oxymorphone. The problem with all of them is that they're all quite addictive, which is why doctors have rightfully always been quite hesitant to prescribe them to their patients. So, how did this epidemic unfold? And I think we should be paying extra attention to this part, because when I recorded this, I didn't realise that from here on out the microphone wasn't recording, and I only took note of this very irritating matter when I wanted to edit it. And then I re-recorded everything. Anyways, it's the year 1996, and the company Purdue Pharma, owned by the Sackler family, had just released their new opioid medication, OxyContin, a pain medication that they aggressively marketed as less addictive than other opioids. Purdue trained their sales representatives to sell OxyContin as being less than 1% addictive. A number far from the truth. According to the American Journal of Medicine, Purdue Pharma also hosted 40 national pain management and speaker training conferences at resorts in Florida, Arizona, and California in the first 5 years after the drug's release. More than 5,000 physicians, pharmacists, and nurses attended these all-expenses-paid symposia, where they were recruited and trained for Purdue's National Speaker Bureau. All expenses-paid conferences like these have been shown to influence how likely physicians are to prescribe drugs. They also released OxyContin-branded fishing hats, plush toys, and CDs. For his covering of the opioid crisis, John Oliver managed to get his hands on one of those OxyContin plush bears, and I'm insanely jealous. Apparently, these marketing efforts worked really, really well. In the first 2 years of the drug's release, 24% of junior high school students had tried OxyContin, and 7% of 7th graders. By the year 2001, the public became concerned when a New York Times article reported that an increased amount of autopsies revealed the drug OxyContin in the bodies of the deceased. And with the mums of overdosed teenagers rallying against Purdue became quite concerned with what this would do to their OxyContin sales. These had risen from $48 million in 1996 to $1.1 billion in 2000. making it the company's most profitable drug ever and contributing to a very large chunk of its revenue. Of course, they became worried when the drug started to get scrutinized. The year's 2002, and not only Purdue Pharma was worried about their sales, but a famous consultancy was also on the lookout for new clients that they could make PowerPoint presentations for. Especially in the pharma field, a sector which McKinsey was already advising many clients in. So, in classic consulting manner, they wrote an article hoping it would attract new customers. According to the book, When McKinsey Comes to Town, the article talked about a better incentivization structure of pharma sales representatives, and using the power of data analysis to find out which sales representatives were the most convincing at selling the drugs, as well as find out which doctors were most likely to prescribe them. Information that could then be used to target them more effectively, marketing-wise. Purdue executives, as well as the executives of Johnson & Johnson, loved the article because they both hired McKinsey. Purdue Pharma hired McKinsey in 2004. This time, the pharma company already knew it might be facing a regulatory backlash and was in sort of a sticky PR situation. 2004 was also the year that the FDA sent Purdue Pharma a letter warning the company that they were grossly overstating OxyContin's safety profile by not mentioning the potentially fatal risks in the advertisement of the drug. So, Purdue called up McKinsey to help. McKinsey assembled a team of consultants headed by 3 of their partners: Martin Elling, the man who had published the article we spoke about, Robert Rosiello, and Arnav Gartag. And by bringing in some more junior people onto the team to absolutely make sure that the slide margins are exactly the same on every slide, they started their work. To counter this irritating PR situation of people becoming opioid addicted and overdosing on their painkillers, McKinsey advised Purdue to employ a 2-part marketing strategy. Make what seemed like reasonable concessions to the public, while obviously also selling as many pills as possible by, for example, rounding up OxyContin users to speak out in favor of the drug. Purdue's concession to the public involved removing their most powerful pill, the 160mg pill, and formulate OxyContin so addicts could no longer crush it to release the active ingredient all at once. This reformulation, however, needed FDA approval, and McKinsey helped Purdue to get it. McKinsey's FDA expert spoke with their top Purdue executives for 2 hours and even role-played an FDA mock meeting. But the reformulation didn't help curb the soaring addiction rates in the US and did nothing to help prevent overdose deaths, as addicts who could no longer obtain OxyContin turned to the black market to buy the pills they were addicted on. And a 100-tablet bottle of OxyContin that cost $400 in the pharmacy would sell for up to $4,000 on the streets. Addicts who couldn't afford this turned to heroin. Street dealers would also spike the OxyContin with fentanyl, an opioid which is up to 100 times more potent than OxyContin. This led to many users dying from unintended overdoses. Among them, for example, the rapper Lil Peep. I'll link my favorite track of his in the description because I really like it and I just feel like it. Anyways, the opioid epidemic was speeding up and was becoming a huge problem for many. Affected individuals were obviously struggling with addiction. Families were being ripped apart, especially in low and middle income areas. Getting off an opioid addiction is incredibly hard and usually not possible without professional help. By 2013, just as the marketing CD swing with OxyContin had predicted, the opioid epidemic was in full swing, with well above 20,000 people dying in 2013, and this number would only grow. And this is not even accounting for the brutal and horrible emotional and physical strain addiction has on living people. And amidst all of this, McKinsey still thought it was wise to continue advising Purdue on how to sell more pills, reassuring executives it was pursuing more than 20 distinct sale-boosting opportunities. The underlings of aforementioned McKinsey partners happily continued working on making PowerPoint slide decks for Purdue executives. I'll now proceed to show you my favorite PowerPoints from McKinsey's several-year-long engagement at Purdue. I've already shown you a glimpse of the wonderful presentation McKinsey made on how to incentivize sales representatives, but let's go and take a closer look at it. This presentation is from September 2013, a time in which more opioids than ever before were pumping through the US population's bloodstream, and health officials were desperate to curb addiction and overdose rates. Also a time in which McKinsey thought it would be appropriate to title the presentation OxyContin's Sales Engine Turbocharged Plan. In this presentation, they claim, in McKinsey speak, that their oh-so-fancy McKinsey analysis verified that so-called high-value doctors should apparently be called on more than 12 times. Additional sales representatives should be added to the sales force, and that this transformation immediately needs a project management office. The presentation then goes on to describe different rollout approaches for the so-called transformation of the sales force. The sell-to-sell approach seems to entail identifying one high-performing sales rep per district to develop an understanding of the transformation and use these high-performing sales reps to train the other sales reps in their field. The so-called wildfire approach seems quite similar, but the high-performing sales reps will lead their own teams, and the so-called champions and learning teams should be pitted against each other in competitions. The headquarter rollout approach apparently entails organizing roadshows to train the sales force by region. But what excites me most about all of these is that all of these can be mixed and matched. And if you thought the absurdity ends here, you would be wrong. As on the next slide, McKinsey writes that exceptional returns should be placed within reach of top performers to pull superstars out of regular champions. Also absolutely love the graphics of this. I think the consultant who put this together did a marvelous job. Also, when Googling the wonderful people who made these impressive slides, it's super interesting to see what they're up to now. It's really impressive to see that most of them still consult in the healthcare sector, or, in the case of the author of this lovely slide deck, have founded their own gut health company and get invited on podcasts to talk about health. I also love that the author here is emphasizing that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to springboard to success. I also love the graphics on the wildfire approach slide. A sales rep should wait outside the boardroom and compare results while management talked about busting obstacles. I would love to continue about more things in this slide deck, but unfortunately there's so many more that we need to get to, so sadly we need to move on from this one. But I'll also link all of them down below, so you can take your time, look at them, click through them, show them to your friends, maybe send them as Christmas cards, or just include them in any of your creative endeavors. Anyways, on to the next slide deck. This one is also from 2013 and shows how McKinsey wanted to counter the decline in opioid sales made possible by the efforts of health authorities and regulators. McKinsey identified so-called pockets of growth for Purdue Pharma by zip codes, just as Martin Elling had written in his 2002 article, to better target the heaviest prescribers by increasing the rates of sales rep visits. This all dates to September 2013. Interestingly enough, in July of that same year, McKinsey was hired by the FDA, the agency that's most responsible for ensuring appropriate drug regulation. McKinsey was hired to reorganize their Center for Drug Regulation and Research. A contract which, by the way, cost the taxpayer $2.6 million. Oh, and also, the FDA had no clue that McKinsey was working with Purdue. They never disclosed that to them. I guess that's the beauty of keeping your client list secret. McKinsey kept on working with Purdue up until 2019. The impact this has had on society is devastating. On an emotional level, the damage is immeasurably high. As for the economic aspects, a study published in 2017 tried to assess the economic burden and labeled it to a damage of $1 trillion. The Joint Economic Forum used the approach to value the economic losses up until early 2020 to $1.5 trillion. We can only assume how high it is in 2024. The irony in all of this is that McKinsey, and for that matter, all other consultancies' career pages paint an entirely different picture. All of them are littered with promises about being able to have a positive impact on society while working there. How much positive work is actually done at consultancies? McKinsey's promises that if you work there, you will get to work on tackling the world's toughest challenges, leveraging technology to accelerate sustainable and inclusive growth is mind-boggling when looking at their secret client list that has been slowly leaking out over the last years. McKinsey has worked for ICE, the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the fraudulent energy company Enron, the Saudi government, almost all the banks on Wall Street ahead of the 2008 financial crisis, and they had so many more concerning engagements. They're consulting fossil fuel companies while at the same time consulting governments on sustainability and putting out statements filled with buzzwords like green transformation about reducing carbon emissions. They regularly consult both sides, companies and their regulators. Opioids was not the only case where they simultaneously worked for the manufacturer and its regulator. They did the exact same thing with the tobacco industry, getting big paychecks from the tobacco companies while at the same time winning millions worth of FDA contracts. They also failed to inform the FDA that they were working for tobacco companies at the same time. As Aaron N. Lindblom, the former director of the FDA's Office of Policy for the Center of Tobacco Products, said he was surprised to learn McKinsey's long record of serving the cigarette companies. They regularly consult both sides, companies and their regulators, and that is illegal in most professions. Like, if you're a lawyer, you can't be working for both sides. There's regulations against this, just not regulations for consulting. And why are consultancies allowed to keep their client lists secret? Anyways, back to my question of why consultancies feel such a heavy need to paint themselves as doing good for society, even though it's more than obvious that making money is their prime objective. I checked Goldman Sachs' career site, and people in investment banking don't seem to feel the need to lie to themselves by promoting how much value they're providing to society. So why do consultancies feel the need to do that? Mariana Mazzucato and Rosie Collington explained this in their book. Management consultancies need to create an impression of value to sell their consulting services, which, as we could see in the PowerPoints for Putty, are a lot of the times just PowerPoint slides with fancy buzzwords on them, and it's not complicated math. Analyzing zip codes is probably something high school students could do, and clients end up paying an insane amount of money for it. And that's because consultancies, and especially McKinsey, are extremely good at creating that impression of value. One method consultancies turn to create an image of being a bunch of super smart experts and problem solvers is hiring graduates from top-ranking universities. According to the book The Big Con, which has been tremendously helpful in my research, McKinsey was famed for hiring Harvard Baker Scholars in the 1960s. Baker Scholars were the top 5% of Harvard's MBA program. Consultancies used to recruit these young, ambitious graduates with the promises of a high salary, a steady career trajectory, and loads of white-collar learning opportunities. All factors which made being a consultant sort of a high-status job. But with investment banking and tech salaries being higher than consultant salaries, and top MBAs whose top priority is earning money, going into the financial services industry, or getting a fancy Silicon Valley tech job, consulting needed to offer something else to win over those young, smart graduates. So they capitalized on what young people who grew up in a connected world, concerned with the world's problems from climate change to inequality, would want. A meaningful job. As an FT article in 2020 put it, millennial management consultants yearn for meaning at work. The article features an interview with Laurie, a graduate with a first-class Oxbridge degree who joined a mid-sized consulting firm and who was excited about enacting real change. Just to be sent to one of the biggest meat producers in the UK to help improve efficiency. And we all know what efficiency means in regard to animal welfare in the meat industry. Another person interviewed in this article is Anna Marie Malley, the head of consulting at Deloitte. She claims that new recruits should keep an open mind. There are challenges and values that you might not realize from the outset. It gets a bit tricky. What meaningful action might mean for one person is different to what it might mean for others. Yeah, I can definitely tell Mrs. Malley and I have very, very different definitions of the word meaningful. If there's anything I can tell from my time in consulting is that none of the work felt meaningful at all. The very sad reality is that the truly meaningful jobs, like nurses, hospital cleaners, teachers, and many more, are paid a lot worse than consulting. It is incredibly sad that white-collar, paper-pushing jobs have managed to attain a way higher social status than the jobs with a real impact that barely even pay a living wage. The book, called Bullshit Jobs by anthropology professor David Graeber, talks about this phenomenon. A huge amount of people spend their entire working lives performing tasks they secretly believe do not really need to be performed. The moral and spiritual damage that comes from this situation is profound. It is a scar across our collective soul, yet virtually no one talks about it. This, combined with the toxic work culture at most consultancies, is why people end up dying. Just 6 months ago, a 25-year-old McKinsey consultant in India committed suicide due to the work pressure. And just a week ago, 26-year-old Anna, employed at Ernst & Young in India, died from toxic work culture as well. We need to talk about what always chasing the money and infinite growth does to our planet, our society, and our mental and physical health. And that is what I want to do. I've had a soul-sucking corporate job and it felt absolutely horrible. But researching industry scams, having this YouTube channel, and having founded my small sustainable jewelry company with my friends feels really meaningful. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, I guess. Thank you so much for making this crazy journey possible for me. But yeah, anyways, there's a lot more to talk about consulting. The most recent scams of all, ESG consulting, which will be the next video. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Please hit the like button as it really helps pushing this video to other people so more people can learn that consulting is a scam. And yeah, bye.